Welcome to the Tricord Advisors podcast. This is where we answer your questions to help you get excited about your finances. This is Randy Barkley, and I'm Jeremiah Lee. We're both certified financial planners, and I'm also a California licensed attorney.
Okay, so we need to kind of slow this down because there is so many things that we could be talking about, and we're trying to get through all of it. So let's just talk about the catch-ups right now. Let's talk about the participants that are behind in their contributions. So there's the Secure Act is providing them some additional benefits, right?
Yeah, and this is a very thin slice. Like this is
Right.
not going to apply to a lot of people, but there will be some people that will be very benefited from this. So people who are, it's very, even to say 61, 62, 63 years old.
And it can't be done. It has to be effective in 2025. It's not in future years. So not now or even next year, right?
So probably people who are, say, 58 or so this year,
right?
They're coming up in these specific ages, and they realize that they're making good income now. They have available income, but they just have not put enough away for retirement that they want to. And so when they get to this, when this becomes effective, and when they're within this narrow age band, they're able to put it's a lesser of formula, but basically 150% of what they would have been able to contribute otherwise into these plans.
So let's try and talk about that. So if somebody has a mortgage and they go into age 60 and all of a sudden their mortgage is paid off and they don't have that $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a month payment anymore, we've encouraged people to increase their contributions to their 403B or 401k. This, if you fell into this specific, this would be a phenomenal opportunity for people to put in a large amount of money.
Yeah. And this is saying that you can put in your regular contribution plus, some of the numbers here are $10,000 in addition to that goes in. So one, it reduces your income, which you're probably in a high income moment. But then also it really helps you catch up. And you can do that for, depending on ages and again, this narrow slice, a couple of years to really get you on track.
It has to be planned because it's only effective after 2025 and you have to be in these ages. It's a very specific thing.
Catch up.
Yeah.
Another one that's a specific one that won't affect everybody is household employees. So folks who hire or employ a nanny or some sort of a house cleaner or things like that, someone who works in their home and that they pay them, in years past, if you had a retirement plan, it kind of had to be related to your actual job. Well, now you can set up it's called a SEP IRA, and that you can have your household employee being a part of that. So you can not only pay them their wage, you can also contribute on their behalf as an employer, contribute into a retirement plan for them.
Right.
So this wouldn't be someone who just comes and does something minor at your house, but someone who's a long-term nanny, a long-term housekeeper, things like that.
Right.
You can really set them up for success. And it's partly too of realizing, what's a competitive to, pay someone who's working in your home. How do you pay them well? How do you take care of their future? This is a great option that didn't exist before. And again, applies to a narrow line of people. But there are some that I can see setting up this plan.
The other thing that the Secure Act is talked about all these exemptions, and these exceptions are very specific to a lot, like firefighters, correction officers, and it has to be 50 years and older for most of them.
Yeah, and the exceptions just to say it's when you have money in an account, in a retirement account, and you need it before you reach your retirement ages.
Or before 59 and a half. There's no penalties on the money coming out.
So say you're 40 and something, or 52, let's just say you're 52, something has come up, and you need to get this money out of the accounts. Usually there's a 10% penalty. However, there's a number of already existing reasons why you can avoid the penalties.
Right.
However, there's now even more of them. So we can go through a few of these that just jump out of situations in which you'd be able to get money out of your retirement account without paying the 10% penalty.
Right. You still have to pay income tax. So anything comes out. Now, again, like one, for example, individuals with terminal illness. If you're below the age 59 and a half and your spouse, let's say, for example, has a terminal illness and you need money, and you're looking at the retirement account, and you'd have to pay penalties on any kind of premature distribution before age 59 and a half. This has the ability to wipe that away, and you're able to get the income out of there and use it for that particular person.
Yeah, before this, you were in a hard spot. You had to break in, get the funds out, and pay penalties. So there's things for terminal illnesses. There's some for domestic abuse, some for long-term care, disaster.
Yeah, long-term care, I looked at it, as I read through it, I kind of like, with a jaundiced eye looked at it. You have to prove to the IRS that you have this policy and it has to meet certain qualifications. And the amount that they give you is only $2,500 a year. Current policies right now for somebody who's like in their 40s or 50s or older, it's going to far exceed $2,500 a year. So
that's an interesting comment, one that they've put in here, but maybe it's not as useful as it could be.
But I think one of the things that you and I talked about is an emergency savings account. I think it's kind of interesting. But again, I don't think they went far enough So it's allowing people to set up money prior to age 59 and a half to set aside money for emergency savings account.
Yeah, we have a lot of folks who are in the building phases say, hey, I'm torn between creating an emergency account and saving for retirement.
Right.
And this kind of helps fill that void. They're able to, through their employer, through the plan, set up an emergency savings account and put money into it. However, the limits on there, I think it was also $2,500.
$2,500,
which is better than nothing, for an emergency savings. But it's not something that I imagine is going to be hugely beneficial by a lot of folks that'll take advantage of this.
Yeah, and again, the requirements on this is you can't be a highly compensated employee, you can't own 5% more in the business, and they got all these different requirements that you have to kind of go through the gates. Okay, I meet that. Okay, now I can get $2,500 in emergency savings account, and you're going to pay income tax on the distribution.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is how does that differ than if you could take out a $2,500 in the event of an emergency and you need that money now instead of putting it in an account that's kind of sitting there and you have to pay taxes, you don't know whether you're going to use it or not.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions.
It's an odd one, yeah.
How would you do with that, right?
So any of these things about using retirement funds, like I said, there was already an existing list. Now we got a longer list. And and for anyone's situation, it's good to check these. One thing I want to bring up a little bit is what was not in the Secure 2.0 Act. There's so much in here that's meaningful and can be meaningful in very specific situations. But there's a lot of chatter before this was passed of what this was going to do. And one of the big pieces was there was concern that the government was going to kind of disincentivize Roth accounts,
right?
To either say, these Roth savings, these Roth IRA or Roth retirement accounts, that there's some of the benefits are going to take them away, strip them out, make it so you can't do what's called a backdoor Roth, make it so that you couldn't do a conversion the same way. And they really didn't do that. And
they didn't touch it.
Yeah. And in fact, I would say that like you said, the Rothification, they kind of went the other way.
Right.
They didn't, pull away incentives. In fact, they probably added a few more. Which is just interesting. It was unexpected by a number of folks.
Yeah, they want, I mean, if you read through this act, and again, I don't ask anybody to read this 4,000 pages, and we're reading through the summary, but it is the primary theme across this is Rothification. I mean, we stated this earlier in the program, but is they want you to pull money out early out of retirement plans, and then you contribute to Roth, but these are all after-tax contributions.
Yeah.
Right? And distributions, right?
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier, it'd be interesting to get the BDO, the kind of the government analysis of how much revenue this type of thing would create or not create for the federal government. Because it could be front loading the taxes, front loading the government's revenue from this.
Because they're looking at this over a 30-year period. I mean, if people are more inclined to do a Roth and they put money in, well, the government makes more money on that. Now, they don't make money at the other end because according to the Roth guidelines right now, is that any money that you get out is not going to be subject to income tax. It's all tax-free. I don't want to make any confirmations at this stage, but I'm always suspicious of what government will do. Like Social Security is supposed to be tax-free. Well, it was tax-free, and then they made a change. Well, anything above, and then it's age-weighted. My gut tells me be careful. Don't believe everything you hear.
There's some concern and distrust. The other thing that's not in here is the 10-year rule, which the Secure Act kind of set up. There's a number of folks who are expecting, I think, some clarifications or amendments to that. So under prior law, if someone passed away and you inherited an IRA from them, they didn't use all their retirement funds, you inherited it, you could stretch it over your lifetime. Well, that went away with the Secure Act.
That was 3 years ago.
Yeah, generally you had about 10 years to take out the money.
And this is for non-spouse beneficiaries or other qualified eligible participants. Again, there's always these rules that you got to follow,
all sorts of details. And so generally for someone who's not a spouse, if you're inheriting this, say a child inheriting from your parents, you probably have about 10 years to get the money out. There's questions, do you have to take RMDs during that time? That's kind of been addressed. Well, there's a number of folks who are expecting the Secure 2.0 to have some amendments to that structure. And there really wasn't. They kind of left that structure in place. So a lot of folks who are inheriting an IRA from a non-spouse, generally they have 10 years to take it out, and generally they have to take RMDs if the deceased spouse would have needed that. But that's general, right? There's very specifics of what.
Yeah, we can't emphasize enough at how important it is to have your beneficiaries structured appropriately within your retirement plans, because it can really backfire on you if you don't have it done properly.
Yeah, just make a mess. And something to always review. I always tell people from the estate planning side that you need to look at your beneficiaries every 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Check your estate planning documents and make sure they still make sense. Same applies for your benefit to your designated beneficiaries on your various accounts. If it still makes sense, easy enough. If it's changed, it's time to make an update.
We didn't touch on so much. The breadth of this act is so broad and it affects so many things. And again, we could send it out to you if you would ever, if you'd ever want to read this. Right now, our summary is about 16 pages that we're going through, and it's very detailed. But more importantly, you just have to have an advisor that's very aware of this, who has access to advice and advisory services that help you make good choices about your retirement plans. The government's changing, and they're changing the way in which distributions and contributions are made. So you just have to be aware of those changes.